Hi, this is Dr. Perry Carpenter. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join me on this week's video. In this week's video, we're in session number 6. Woo! Our 6th and final session in our new series entitled Complex Medical Decision Making and the QME. And in today's session, I want to share with you the final piece to your difficult medical decision making puzzle. The final piece of the puzzle that will give you relief on what QMEs consider to be the most difficult determination that they're called upon to render in the entirety of their QME report, and that has to do with your apportionment approximate percentages. And in this program, we spent the better part now of almost 6 hours talking about what it is that QMEs consider to be the most difficult issues that they face in finally completing their QME report. And if it was not for these difficult medical decision-making choke points, qualified medical evaluators would have their reports done on the very day after the face-to-face evaluation. It's because of these difficult medical decision-making choke points that QMEs delay the production of the report. They postpone, they defer the completion of their QME report, and they set that problem they set the problem aside on their desk until finally on the 29th day, or now during the COVID extension that we have, to the 44th day. They postpone their medical decision making until the very last minute, when finally they have to, like it or not, they have to confront the fact that they need to get their QME report out in the mail, and they must render opinions on the difficult issues, whether that be an AOE COE determination in a denied case, whether it be in providing an accurate permanent impairment rating in an accepted case, and in those cases that do involve a permanent impairment rating, providing for their apportionment approximate percentages. And these are the areas where qualified medical evaluators tell me that they struggle the most in the reports. See, qualified medical evaluators don't struggle with the demographic portion of their report, wherein they indicate the examinee's demographics, the name, date, social security number, claim number. QMEs don't struggle with that data entry type of activity involved with their report. No, it's where they're required to put on their thinking cap and sit down and challenge themselves to synthesize all the relevant facts of the case and come up with opinions and conclusions that qualify as substantial medical evidence. That's where qualified medical evaluators have difficulty. And in this program, I've given you some tools to help you arrive at the perfectly accurate and correct AOE COE determination in every single case, and specifically with regards to the case that involves the claim for industrial injury when that claim was filed post-employment. So this is the post-employment cumulative trauma injury claim. I gave you some tools to show you how to handle the AOE COE determination in those claims. In our last 2 sessions, we talked about how to arrive at correct and accurate permanent impairment ratings for those examinees who have suffered a bona fide industrial injury and who are left with some permanent residuals as a result of that injury. Accuracy in rating is key. Accuracy in the permanent impairment rating is everything. Accuracy in the permanent impairment rating is central to the resolution of the case. So it's critical that your permanent impairment ratings stand up to scrutiny by all the parties. All the competing parties are going to scrutinize your permanent impairment rating, and your rating can only stand up, it will only stand up to scrutiny when it's accurate. Okay, and I shared with you some tools as to how to arrive at accurate permanent impairment ratings. In today's session, I want to talk to you about your apportionment approximate percentages in those cases where the examinee receives a permanent impairment rating from you. Now, when we talk about the apportionment of the permanent impairment, and when we talk about permanent impairment in general, these are cases that come to us not under Labor Code 4060. See, it's the denied case that requires an AOE-COE determination. Those disputes come to us under Labor Code 4060 at the inception of the claim. Once the claim has been accepted and the employee goes through a period of medical treatment and has had adequate time to recover to maximum medical improvement, then they come to us for the end of claim issues, which is the permanent impairment determination and the determination of the apportionment approximate percentages. So these are disputes that we're going to handle at the end of the claim, okay? So at the end of the claim, when you provide your permanent impairment rating, it's required that you provide an apportionment of the permanent impairment. And it's your determination on the apportionment that tells the payer, which is the claims administrator, how much of the permanent impairment rating they are financially liable for. How much of the resultant permanent impairment is compensable out of their pocket, the other portion of which the injured employee has to subsume himself, in other words, has to eat it himself. So the apportionment approximate percentages are critical. And doctors call me all the time and they ask me, how in the world can I come up with apportionment approximate percentages? I mean, can I just say every single time that it's 50% due to the industrial injury and 50% due to other factors? Or if I wanted to do 60-40, how could I support it? Or what if I thought it was 70-30? How could I reason that out? In other words, how do you actually come up with the apportionment approximate percentages? Well, I want to share with you in today's discussion some tools that you can lean on, that you can rely on, that you can depend upon when it comes time and you find yourself down in the short rows, difficulty in your difficult medical decision making repose, and wondering to yourself, how much longer is it going to take for me to get out of this report and get it in the mail? I want to share with you some ideas that you can depend upon that will help you in every single case that has a permanent impairment rating associated with it. So with that as our introduction, let's begin today's discussion, which is session number 6 in our new series, Complex Medical Decision Making and the QME. And in today's session, we're talking about your apportionment approximate percentages. Okay, so let's begin today's discussion on your apportionment approximate percentages. Now, I want you to imagine this. So imagine you're dealing with a difficult case, like all of our cases are nowadays, right? All of our cases nowadays involve examinees who have some past, some history that factors into the current permanent impairment apportionment. And you're faced with the task of providing your apportionment approximate percentages to tell the parties how much of the permanent impairment is due to the industrial injury for which the insurance company and the claims payer is liable to recompense the injured employee, and how much is due to other factors, which is the employee's responsibility. And you know in advance that your apportionment approximate percentages are going to be challenged by both parties because of the differing incentives that each of the parties have with regards to apportionment. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. And you find yourself on a Saturday afternoon struggling with the apportionment approximate percentages. Well, I want to give you some tools upon which you can rely when it comes time to confidently provide your apportionment approximate percentages and how to make your opinion on the apportionment approximate percentages substantial medical evidence. And I want to share with you a story that sort of analogizes how these tools can help you and how they can help expedite your medical decision making process. So I have a story to share with you. And this is a story that happened just yesterday. This is a true story. So at my house, I have this gate that crosses my driveway. And the gate opens and closes to keep non-visitors out of the driveway, and to prevent people from coming to the house who are uninvited people, okay? Well, recently the gate started opening and closing slower and slower, such that over the last couple days the gate is, just barely making it to the open and closed position. And so I realized that something must be wrong with the battery. This gate is powered by a battery. It's a small battery that would go in a tractor or a small quad, something like that. So I grabbed my trusty tools, and I went out there with a screwdriver, and I went out there with a crescent wrench, and I uncovered the battery, and sure enough, the battery looked 100 years old and had all kind of corrosion over the leads that attached to the battery. And as I inspected the battery had the potential to be restored. It seemed to me that probably the problem that was preventing the battery from fully operating the gate was that the battery was failing to fully recharge itself due to all the corrosion that had accumulated on the leads. So I had the bright idea that I would clean up the battery and clean off the corrosion and hope for the best that the battery might start recharging again and would properly power the gate. So as I got down there to disconnect the leads, don't you know, as fate always has it, right? There was so much corrosion on the bolts that hold the lead to the battery that the bolt was essentially ankylosed, to use an anatomic term. There was no movement. You could not unscrew the screw from the bolt. They were fused, essentially fused through corrosion. And I found myself at a decision-making choke point. This is like the medical decision-making choke point we come to when it comes time to figure out what are our apportionment approximate percentages. So as I knelt beside this battery, like most qualified medical evaluators do, my mind went through my options. I searched my mind for what are my options now that I cannot remove the screw and the bolt from this battery? What can I do? And my first option was maybe I'll have to call a repairman. And I thought about the cost and the time delay and the hassle of that, and I discarded that option. And then I thought, well, maybe I could just cut the lead, but then that would require replacing all of the wiring, and which would require a trip down to the hardware store, and who knows if I could properly get it properly hooked back up again. And then I thought of taking a large hammer and just breaking the assembly off of the base of the battery itself. And I thought that that would probably not work because it would still come off. The piece would come off still with the screw attached. And so as I sat there basically at a standstill, at a choke point, at a dead spot, like most qualified medical evaluators do when it comes time to provide the apportionment approximate percentages, I remembered, I had a flash of memory, and I remembered that down at my shop, I have a hacksaw. I have a tool, and there was just enough play in that screw that I could fit my hacksaw in there, and I could hacksaw off the bolt, which would free up the lead, and I would have the assembly undamaged and ready to roll in the case that perhaps I would place a new battery at the gate. Okay? And so I went down to my shop, I retrieved a hacksaw, brought it back up, and I hacksawed that bolt off, and with the proper tool, the whole project took about 15 minutes. Whereas had I called a repairman, had I cut the lead, had I exercised any of the other options, would have extended the project many fold, much as the way qualified medical evaluators let their reports sit on their desk until the 29th day, and the project expands to the point that it becomes overwhelming and they just can't confront the issue. Well, with the proper tools, your apportionment approximate percentages are going to become infinitely easier just as if you had a hacksaw to cut that bolt off. And the tools that I want to share with you with relation to your apportionment approximate percentages are founded in the labor codes that govern the apportionment determination, and those are 4463 and 4464. So to begin at the beginning and to begin with the basics, let's go over some of these passages from both of these labor codes so that you understand the framework around which your apportionment approximate percentages are going to be fashioned. And if you can understand the basic framework, some of the pieces and the details will fill themselves in once you get the framework of the apportionment determination established. It's kind of like stepping back and getting a big picture view by looking at the big picture of the framework first and then allowing the details to settle into their proper place. So a couple key passages that we as qualified medical evaluators need to understand include 4663B, which tells us that a physician who prepares a report addressing the issue of permanent disability due to a claimed industrial injury shall address, shall is mandatory, in that report the issue of the causation of the permanent disability. And that's what the parties look to us for, is to tell them what is the cause. What is the cause of the disability? And there can be any number of causes, from one single solitary cause to as many as the sky is the limit, numbers of causes of the final permanent disability. And Section C tells us in order for a physician's report to be considered complete on the issue of permanent disability, the report must include an apportionment determination. So when you provide a permanent impairment rating in your report, you must, by law, this is 4663C, you must, by law, provide apportionment approximate percentages. Now, because this is required by law under 4663, does not mean that your discussion of apportionment qualifies as a complexity factor under CCR 9795. In other words, merely discussing apportionment, which is required by law, is not the same as your apportionment discussion qualifying as a complexity factor under CCR 9795. So you must, every single time that you provide a permanent impairment rating, you must provide the parties with your opinion as to the causes of that permanent disability. Okay, and so Labor Code 4663 tells us that we must provide an apportionment determination in every single case that involves a permanent impairment rating. And 4663 continues by telling us what that apportionment determination must consist of. And here is where you're going to find your first tool that will greatly simplify your decision making when it comes the proper time. 4663 tells us the physician shall make an apportionment determination by finding, number one, what approximate percentage of the permanent disability was caused by the direct result of injury arising out of and occurring in the course of employment. They want to know what percentage of the impairment is caused by the industrial injury. Now, what parties are going to be interested in this percentage? All the parties are going to be interested in this percentage, correct? With the employee and the applicant attorney seeking to maximize the compensation under this percentage, and the claims payer and the defense attorney seeking to minimize the percentage of the impairment that's a direct result of the industrial injury. So all parties are going to scrutinize your opinion on this percentage. And then you must then tell us, on the other hand, what approximate percentage of the permanent disability was caused by other factors, both before and subsequent. Subsequent means after. So both before and after the industrial injury, including prior industrial injuries. Now, let's break this down, and here's where you're going to find your hacksaw to help you solve the apportionment dilemma. I put asterisks here next to the words before and the words after, and this is going to be something that we're going to explore in just a minute. When it comes time to provide your apportionment approximate percentages, you're going to wish you had facts. You're going to wish you had facts about other factors before the industrial injury, and you're going to wish you had facts about other factors after the industrial injury, because it's these facts about the employee's or examinee's history, both before the date of injury and after the date of injury, upon which your apportionment approximate percentages are going to be based. And I'm going to show you just exactly how to accumulate those facts here in just a minute. And then also, the other key takeaway from this section of Labor Code 4663 is it tells us that we can apportion to prior industrial injuries. So the exact language says what percent of the permanent disability was caused by other factors, both before and subsequent to the industrial injury, including prior industrial injuries. Now, isn't this fascinating? Notice that the language of the law does not state prior sports injuries. It does not say prior automobile accident injuries. It does not say prior slip and fall injuries. Of course, all of those can be apportioned to, but the language of the law specifically draws our attention to prior industrial injuries, because lawmakers that enacted this law back in 2004 as part of Senate Bill 899, the purpose of which was to reduce skyrocketing costs in workers' compensation, lawmakers at the time realized that many examinees come back with multiple industrial injuries. And prior to the passage of this exact portion of the law in 4663, examinees were coming back and there was being no apportionment to the prior industrial injuries, even prior industrial injuries to the same body parts. So under Labor Code 4663, you can provide apportionment to prior industrial injuries if you feel that the prior industrial injury has contributed to the current permanent impairment. And lawmakers specifically direct our attention to prior industrial injuries. So here's your first tool. You want to inquire, interrogate, thoroughly question your examinee about prior industrial injuries or any industrial injury either before or after the current subject industrial injury. I want to show you exactly how to do that in what we refer to as the relevant medical history section of your face-to-face interview. So in the relevant medical history section of your report, you're going to be accumulating the facts and the data upon which your apportionment approximate percentages are going to rely. So when you have a case and the case comes to you under Labor Code 4061 or 4062, and the dispute is at the end of the case and you're charged with providing a permanent impairment rating for the examinee, you need to know in advance that you're going to be required to provide an apportionment determination as well. And so you begin to accumulate the facts upon which your apportionment approximate percentages are going to be based through your review of the medical records, and then secondarily, subsequently, in your face-to-face interview with the examinee. So you're going to be scouring the medical records for any description of prior injuries, any prior settlements, any descriptions from the medical records that relate to the body parts involved with your employee's injury. And then you're going to supplement those findings from the medical records by the claimant's description. All of this is going to go into your relevant medical history section of your report. And trust me, when it comes time to provide your apportionment approximate percentages, you're going to wish you had done a better job in this particular section of your report. You cannot do too good of a job. in this section of your report. The more facts that you have related to other factors, and the more facts that you have related to prior industrial injuries, the more accurate and the more irrefutable and the more substantial can be your apportionment approximate percentages. So a line of questioning that you're going to ask yourself, and that you're going to ask yourself as you review the medical records, and that you're going to ask the examinee in the face-to-face interview, has to do with prior industrial injuries. Mrs. Jones, prior to your April 1st, 2020 injury with ABC Enterprises, have you ever had another industrial injury? Yes, I did. And then get all the details about that prior industrial injury. And I'll share with you some of the details that you'll seek in just a minute. But suffice to say for here, you're going to want to get many, many, many details about that prior industrial injury. This is consistent with Labor Code 4663. Mrs. Jones, have you had any prior injury at any time in your life to your neck? And get a history about prior non-industrial injuries. Mrs. Jones, since the injury with ABC Enterprises on April 1st, 2020, have you had any additional injuries to your neck? Oh yes, I had a motor vehicle accident 3 months ago. And get all the details regarding the motor vehicle accident. And I'll share with you what are the relevant details in just a minute. But can you see how the history starts to come together, and it starts to be able to provide you the facts upon which your apportionment determination can be based. Have you had any injuries to your neck off the job? Any slip and falls? Any sports injuries? Did you ever wake up in the morning with a stiff neck from sleeping on it wrong? And get a history regarding non-industrial off-site, off-the-job site injuries to the same body part. Finally, in order to be comprehensive, sometimes you have to approach examinees in a different way, and you have to come straight out and ask them, Mrs. Jones, have you ever, and take them all the way back to childhood, have you ever had injury to your neck at any point in your life? Or the basic question is, have you ever had injury to the same or similar body part that is now involved in this workers' compensation claim? And you get a history from them as to what other factors may contribute to your apportionment approximate percentages. And when it comes time to provide your apportionment approximate percentages, you're going to wish that you had more fully developed this section of your report because you cannot have too many facts. You certainly can have too few facts, but you certainly cannot have too many facts upon which to substantiate your apportionment approximate percentages. Okay? So that's a little bit about 4663. What about Labor Code 4664? Now, Labor Code 4664 deals with a different aspect of the situation where the examinee has suffered a prior industrial injury. So remember that we can apportion under Labor Code 4663 to prior industrial injuries. And in those examinees who've had a prior industrial injury where the industrial injury has gone on to cause a permanent disability award, that is handled slightly differently under Labor Code 4664. So let's talk here about 4664, and here's where you're going to find your next set of tools for dealing with those examinees for whom you've discovered that they have had prior industrial injuries. So Section A of 4664 tells us that the employer shall be only liable for the percentage of the permanent disability that's directly caused by the injury occurring and arising out of the workplace duties. So you can expect that the defense attorney is going to hammer and hound you to get you to minimize this percentage. The defense attorney is very, very motivated to discover for him or herself the other factors, some of the other factors that may go in to the apportionment determination, and they will bring them to your attention. On the other hand, the applicant attorney is going to harass and hound you to maximize this percentage in order to maximize the disability settlement award for their examinee and also for themselves and for their firm. So your apportionment approximate percentages are going to be scrutinized by all parties. So in an examinee who has had a prior industrial injury, the law tells us under Section B, if the applicant has received a prior award of permanent disability, it shall be conclusively presumed that the permanent disability exists at the time of any subsequent industrial injury. This presumption is a presumption affecting the burden of proof. So let's take these sentences one at a time. What this section of the law tells us that if an examinee has had a prior industrial injury and the examinee has been declared permanent and stationary by either the primary treating physician or you as the qualified medical evaluator, and the examinee has been declared to have permanent impairment, and that permanent impairment rating has then been used down at the disability evaluation unit to rate the examinee for permanent disability, and the case closes with a findings and award for permanent disability. In other words, the examinee receives a settlement consistent with their percentage of permanent disability. That disability exists forever. Forever. It never goes away. It's a label that's attached to the examinee forever. And it persists and exists specifically at the time that the examinee had a subsequent industrial injury. Now, the purpose of the passage of this section of Labor Code 4664, which is new, this was enacted in 2004 as part of Senate Bill 899, which at the time was enacted for the purpose of trying to contain and constrain what were referred to as skyrocketing costs in workers' compensation. Well, one way to address skyrocketing costs is to say, hey, if this examinee has had a prior award of permanent disability, it doesn't just go away. The examinee cannot then have a subsequent industrial injury and say, all of my current permanent impairment and all of my current permanent disability is due to this new injury and none of it was due to the old injury. In other words, I rehabilitated myself after that first injury. I went to the gym, I lost weight, I changed my diet. I was rehabilitated. I was brand new. And therefore, all of the problems that I'm having today are due to the new injury and none are due to the prior injury. And this section of the law prevents a claim for medical rehabilitation after a prior industrial injury for which there was a permanent disability award. Now, when the law says the prior permanent disability exists, what is it? What is it that the law is insisting that continues to exist? Is it simply the numeric rating of the permanent impairment rating? In other words, you evaluated the examinee 4 years ago and provided a permanent impairment rating for DRE Category 2 for a lumbar spine injury at 8% whole person impairment. Is it the numeric rating that exists today after a new subsequent injury, 1 year ago? Is it the numeric rating? Well, yes, it is. It is the numeric rating. But it's also every other aspect of the permanent disability, such as what? How about the pain? How about the pain? When the examinee comes and he says, after the subsequent industrial injury, and even today when you're evaluating me, doctor, I have pain. Pain. Examinees are going to tell you, right? They're going to tell you they have pain. Well, according to the law, the pain existed. What about when the examinee comes to you and tells you that they're stiff? They have loss of range of motion. The loss of range of motion existed. What about activities of daily living losses? When the examinee says, I have loss of function for fill in the blank, self-care and personal hygiene, travel activities, non-specialized hand activities, physical activities, okay? The law tells us that every single aspect of the prior permanent disability exists at the time of any subsequent industrial injury. Therefore, in order for the examinee to receive any permanent disability award, their permanent impairment rating has to be greater than it was for the prior industrial injury. In other words, they come into the second industrial injury, the subsequent industrial injury, already damaged goods. They were already in rough shape. They already had problems. So when this examinee comes to you in the face-to-face evaluation and tells you that they have problems, don't be surprised. Don't be surprised, because by law, you're only concerned with the worsening. With the worsening. They were already in bad shape. Your investigation has to deal with the worsening. So here's the next tool for you in arriving at your accurate apportionment approximate percentages, and that has to do with investigating the worsening. So let's talk about some of your investigations and some of the questions that you're going to ask the examinee related to their worsening. So if you know that the employer is only responsible for the percentage of the permanent disability directly due to the industrial injury, and you know that the examinee was already damaged good at the time of the subsequent industrial injury, then you know that the employer is only responsible for any worsening. And so, like you did with Section 4663 related to prior industrial injuries, under 4664 you're going to do the same type of investigation in the relevant medical history section of your report. And in this particular scenario, under 4664, you're going to be concerned with investigating and with accumulating facts regarding the worsening of the examinee's condition. So you may ask the examinee to tell you about the prior industrial injuries. Give me the history of the injury. Tell me what happened. What was the mechanism of injury? How did you hurt yourself? What was the disposition of the case? Did you get any permanent impairment award? Did you have a qualified medical evaluation? How did the case close? Did it close with a compromise and release, or did it close with a permanent disability award? At the time, did you have any limitations with activities of daily living? What were they? Were you able to resume your pre-injury work activities, or did you have permanent work restrictions? What was the nature of the medical treatment? What type of treatment did you get? Well, you had chiropractic and physical therapy for that injury, and you also had chiropractic and physical therapy for this injury as well. What other types of treatment did you have? What types of treatment are you having currently that's similar to the type of treatment that you had for the prior industrial injury? And basically what you're looking for is you're looking for any overlap or lack of overlap between the prior permanent disability, the prior permanent impairment and or disability, and the current impairment or disability, and the areas of overlap where the factors of disability are the same, comparing the prior industrial injury to the current industrial injury. That overlap, the employer is not responsible for. The employer is only responsible for what's new, for what's worsened, for what's different, for what's above and beyond the prior condition of damaged goods under Labor Code 4664. So when you have these cases, it pays to know in advance the tools that you're going to need for the job. It pays to know that you're going to need a hacksaw before you go and address corroded battery terminals, okay? Someone with more experience than I in dealing with household repairs would have already brought a hacksaw to the job because they've probably already seen corroded battery terminals before in their career of handyman work. Well, for me, it was brand new. Well, for you, in dealing with cases that you're going to be providing a permanent impairment rating, you know that you're being required to, or being called upon to provide an apportionment approximate percentages, then you know in advance that either under 4663 or under 4664, you need to dig for facts related to prior industrial injuries, especially under 4664, where you know by law you're going to be apportioning out at least some of the current permanent impairment rating to the prior industrial injury, which by law says the prior disability exists and persists at the time of the subsequent industrial injury. So it pays to assemble these tools in advance and to know the nature of the job before you even get to the face-to-face evaluation. Okay? So when you provide your apportionment approximate percentages and when you assemble all of these facts and you feel confident and ready to stick your neck out and tell the parties that it was 10% due to the industrial injury and 90% due to other factors, or 80-20 or 70-30, or whatever your apportionment approximate percentages, your apportionment approximate percentages are going to be scrutinized by the parties, especially by the defense attorney who's hoping to save a nickel on the cost of this claim, many times through which the apportionment determination is the only opportunity they have to reduce the cost of the claim once the examinee has already received medical treatment, has already received 2 years of total temporary disability. Sometimes it's only on the apportionment approximate percentages that the defense attorney can get any kind of a win. So your percentages are going to be heavily scrutinized by the parties, and so therefore it's essential, it's critical, and it's required that your apportionment approximate percentages qualify as substantial medical evidence. So let's talk about exactly that, and that is how to qualify your apportionment approximate percentages as substantial medical evidence. Now, when it comes to qualifying your opinions and conclusion on the apportionment approximate percentages, it's the Escobedo case that gives us the formula, that gives us the tools upon which to fashion the job, upon which we can fashion our opinions and conclusions in order that our opinions and conclusions rise to the high level and the high standard and the lofty ideal as what's referred to as substantial medical evidence. And here's your tools. Escobedo told us that to be substantial evidence on the issue of the apportionment approximate percentages due to the industrial injury and the apportionment approximate percentages due to other factors, a medical opinion must be, and herein Escobedo gives us the tools. Here's your screwdriver, here's your hammer, here's your hacksaw, here's the tools that you're going to rely upon in fashioning your opinion. It must, number one, it must be framed in terms of reasonable medical probability. Number two, it must not be speculative. Number three, it must be based on pertinent facts. And we're gonna expand on pertinent facts here in just a minute. It must be based on an adequate examination and an adequate history, and it must set forth the reasoning in support of its conclusions. So these are the tools you're going to use. You're going to go through your report and use the tool to remove speculation. You're going to use the tool to provide reasoning. You're going to use the tool by showing that you've done an adequate examination and history. You're going to use the tool of assembling the pertinent facts in the relevant medical history section of your report. These are the tools by which you fashion your apportionment approximate percentages. So as you look at these tools, let's ask ourselves, how could we possibly use these tools in our report? Number one, we frame our opinion in terms of reasonable medical probability. How would you do that? You would do that in the following way. You would say in your report, in my opinion, comma, within reasonable medical probability, comma, 90% of the permanent impairment is due to the industrial injury and 10% is due to other factors, period. And you frame your opinion, you frame it in terms of reasonable medical probability, meaning that that opinion is 51% or greater likelihood of being correct. You use that phrase in describing your apportionment approximate percentages. When it comes to setting forth the reasoning, you would then follow up that statement in my opinion, within reasonable medical probability, 10% and 90%, period. Reasons for this conclusion include, and you set forth the reasoning. And your reasoning is going to be based on the pertinent facts. And when it comes time for you to provide your apportionment approximate percentage, what are the facts that are pertinent to the apportionment approximate percentages? See, pertinent facts are facts that are pertinent to the apportionment approximate percentages. Those are different from facts. Okay, facts are not always pertinent facts. And that may sound like a bit of a tongue twister, but sometimes qualified medical evaluators, in providing their apportionment approximate percentages, will cite facts, and those facts are actual true facts, but they're not pertinent facts that support the apportionment approximate percentage of 90-10, 70-30, whatever. So it's important that your facts be pertinent facts. And always ask yourself, how is this pertinent to the apportionment approximate percentages? So let's talk about what are some of the facts that are pertinent to your apportionment approximate percentages. So when it comes time to provide your apportionment approximate percentages, what are the facts that are relevant? What are the facts that are pertinent to your apportionment approximate percentages? Well, we're going to talk about several of those. The most important of which is, bar none, is the mechanism of injury. The mechanism of injury. Now, it was the Escobedo case that brought into light and into view and actually into law the importance of the mechanism of injury in providing the apportionment approximate percentages. In the Escobedo case, the medical evaluator described the mechanism of injury of Miss Escobedo's knees as trivial. He used the word trivial. And I'm suggesting that you classify your mechanism of injury into one of three categories: mild injuries, moderate injuries, and severe injuries. In Escobedo, he used the word trivial. That might be the same as what I'm describing as mild. So in incidences of injury that involve a mild mechanism of injury, and the examinee is left with permanent impairment, then obviously a large percentage of that permanent impairment is going to be due to other factors, and only a small percentage is going to be due to the industrial injury itself, because the industrial injury itself was such a mild mechanism of injury. Okay? And you can think of the mechanism of injury as a spectrum, as a continuum, from mild injuries here to severe injuries here. And when you provide for your permanent impairment rating for those injuries that involve a mild mechanism of injury, a high percentage of the permanent impairment is going to be due to other factors. Whereas with a severe mechanism of injury, the converse is true, where a high percentage of the permanent impairment is now going to be due to the industrial injury, and a very small percentage is going to be due to other factors, whereas at the other end of the spectrum, a very large percentage of the permanent impairment on this end of the spectrum, the mild injury side of the spectrum, is going to be due to other factors, pre-existing conditions, degenerative changes, prior industrial injuries, etc. Also important is the examinee's response to appropriate medical care. If you've had an examinee who had a mild mechanism of injury and has gone through the entire gamut of medical treatment, including conservative treatment and pain management treatment and medication interventions, and has had adequate medical treatment, but fails to recover to pre-injury condition, in other words, is left with a permanent impairment rating, right? Examinees who recover to pre-injury condition don't receive a permanent impairment rating. So when the examinee fails to recover to pre-injury condition, despite adequate medical treatment, despite appropriate medical treatment, something is blocking them, something is preventing them from achieving a pre-injury condition. That can be apportioned out, and the employer is not liable, okay, after the employee pays for and provides medical treatment, the purpose of which is to get the examinee well. If the examinee doesn't get well, then there's something blocking the examinee from getting well, and that can be apportioned out. You also want to have many pertinent facts related to pre-existing conditions, and that comes in the relevant medical history section of your report. Again, we talked about whether or not the examinee had a prior industrial injury, whether or not the examinee received a prior permanent disability award, and when it comes time to take those corroded battery cables off of the battery, you're going to wish you had the proper tools. Similarly, when it comes time to provide your apportionment approximate percentages, you're going to wish you had as many facts as you can possibly ascertain regarding some of these issues so that you can properly fashion your apportionment approximate percentage. And then let me show you how you would then structure your apportionment determination in the body of your QME report. Okay, so you've assembled the tools and you're ready to get the job done. So how do you do that? As I said before, you begin in the apportionment section of your report. Okay, so imagine this in your report. You have a topic heading in bold. It says apportionment of the permanent impairment, and it's in this section that you're going to tell the parties how much of the permanent impairment the claims payer is responsible for and how much of the permanent impairment has to be eaten by the examinee. So you begin in this section of your report by stating, in my opinion, comma, within reasonable medical probability, comma, X% of the permanent impairment is due to the industrial injury, comma, and X% of the permanent impairment is due to other factors, period. And you can use that phrase in every single report wherein you provide a permanent impairment rating, because in every single report that involves a permanent impairment rating, you must provide, by law, an apportionment approximate percentage. So there you just did it. You just did it. You provided the apportionment approximate percentages. Now, to qualify those apportionment approximate percentages as substantial medical evidence, you then use your tools and you tell the parties, my reasons, remember, how and why reasoning? How and why reasoning is required by Escobedo. My reasons for the above apportionment approximate percentages include the following, colon, number 1. And you tell us that the opinion is based on reasonable medical probability, and it does not rely on surmise, conjecture, speculation, or guess. Here you use two of the tools provided by Escobedo. You predicate and formulate and format your opinion based on reasonable medical probability, and you tell us that it doesn't involve any surmise, conjecture, or guess. Now, you can't just say it. It has to actually be true. So as you review your apportionment approximate percentages, you ask yourself, is any of this me just guessing? Is any of this just me speculating? If so, go back and rework your apportionment approximate percentages to remove any of the surmise, conjecture, speculation, or guess. Reasons number 2, pertinent facts, colon, and you would formulate it just like this in your report. Number 1, reasonable medical probability, comma, and then tell us. And then pertinent facts, colon, and then tell us. I'm sorry, I should have said colon. And then tell us. The facts that are relevant to the above apportionment approximate percentages upon which I rely include, colon, and then tell us what are the facts upon which you base your approximate percentage due to the industrial injury, and give us all those facts. And then give us all the facts upon which you base your percentage due to other factors. You must explain both of the approximate percentages. Correct? Because the applicant attorney is going to attack one argument, the defense attorney is going to attack the other argument. So you have to provide both arguments, and both arguments have to be good. So give us the facts. Tell us about the mechanism of injury and how that contributes to your apportionment approximate percentages. Tell us about the response to medical care. Tell us whether there was pre-existing conditions, prior industrial injury, prior permanent disability award. Pull facts from the examination. Pull facts from the history section to support all of these factual discoveries. Show us where you came upon those discoveries in your brilliant history taking and in your brilliant examination, and then give us the how and why reasoning as to how you came up with these apportionment approximate percentages. And guess what? Guess what? There's no better way that you can possibly arrive at the truthful and accurate apportionment approximate percentages than this exact formula, which has been described in law in the Escobedo case. In other words, this formula has been arrived at by experts over decades and decades of resolution of difficult medical legal issues in the courts. This is the formula that the courts, in their infinite wisdom, have arrived upon, and you can do no better. Now, if you follow this formula and you provide adequate how and why reasoning based on pertinent facts without surmise, conjecture, speculation, or guess, then your apportionment approximate percentages will be upheld. They'll be correct. They'll be accurate. The reason they'll be upheld is because they're accurate. Now, they may not be accurate if new information comes to light, but based upon the information that you have, based upon the information available in the case, based upon the pertinent facts surrounding the case that are available, the apportionment approximate percentages will be the true, accurate, correct, and naturally right apportionment approximate percentages for the resolution of the case. Now, those apportionment approximate percentages could change if you're provided with new information, or if one of the parties raises some data that was heretofore unknown that you may then integrate into your medical decision making. It may result in a change in your apportionment approximate percentages, or it may not, but based upon the facts that you have available at the time, the apportionment approximate percentages can be done no better than simply using the tools that have been provided for us. So doctors, that's not so difficult after all, is it? It really comes down to, like the battery and the gate job that I explained earlier in today's discussion. It begins by knowing what is the job that you're being called upon to perform. And basically our jobs can be divided into two broad classifications. Those that involve disputes at the inception of the claim, those are going to be dealing with AOE, COE issues. And for those types of jobs, you need to assemble certain tools. And the tools that I provided to you for that job is known as the causation algorithm. And then for disputes that come at the end of the claim, you know that the job deals with providing a permanent impairment rating that's accurate. And then once an accurate permanent impairment rating has been arrived at, you're then responsible to do the job of giving the parties the apportionment approximate percentages. And I gave you some tools that will allow you to quickly and accurately arrive at permanent impairment ratings that are accurate and also apportionment approximate percentages that are accurate. So these difficult issues over which qualified medical evaluators struggle greatly need not be so difficult at all. And actually, like I was telling you with repairing my gate, and like I told you in another discussion as well, like the job of sharpening my wife's hedge trimmers and bush cutters, it begins by assembling the tools in advance of the job. If you can determine what's the job and what the disputed issue is, you can then assemble the tools in advance and handle the whole job in advance, because when it comes time for you to provide your opinions and conclusions in your report, you're going to wish you had the facts upon which to do the job. And we assemble those facts in our review of the case, the medical records prior to the face-to-face evaluation, and then also through our interview and interrogation skills at the face-to-face evaluation. When you assemble the tools in advance, the jobs need not be difficult at all, and you need not struggle with your QME reporting, and you can get that report quickly off your desk, and you can take the weekend off and for once begin to enjoy your life by not struggling over these reports on the 29th or the 44th day on a late Sunday afternoon when you'd rather be out doing something else. So doctors, I hope this helps you. It's been my pleasure to be with you through this program, the Complex Medical Decision Making and the QME, and I look forward to being with you on future programs as well. For today, this is Dr. Perry Carpenter, wishing you best of success in your career as a qualified medical evaluator.